My friends, something is clearly different around the Detroit Lions right now, and the first OTA observations are beginning to reveal why. For the first time in months, fans are finally getting a real look at what this roster is starting to become, and some of the early developments are already creating interesting storylines across both sides of the ball. One of the biggest takeaways from the practice sessions is how Detroit is handling its young talent. While OTAs are never the place to overreact, they do provide valuable clues about how the coaching staff views certain players, and one rookie appears to be earning significant trust immediately. Blake Miller spent the majority of his reps working at right tackle, reportedly handling roughly 70 to 80% of the opportunities with the primary group. That is notable because the Lions have traditionally preferred making rookies earn their way into starting roles regardless of draft status. Instead of slowly bringing Miller along, Detroit appears willing to accelerate the process and begin building chemistry with what could become the long-term offensive line configuration. The offensive line continues to be one of the most important stories to monitor throughout the offseason. Christian Mahogany appears positioned as the starter at left guard, but competition remains active behind him. Miles Frazier received work at both guard spots, while Juice Scruggs rotated throughout all three interior offensive line positions. That versatility could become extremely valuable later in the season, especially for a team that understands how important depth can be during a long NFL schedule. On the defensive side, the Lions gave fans an early look at some of their personnel groupings. When Detroit used three linebacker sets, Jack Campbell, Derek Barnes, and Malcolm Rodriguez were the primary trio. In the secondary, DJ Reed and Rock Ya-Sin worked with the starting group, while Ennis Rakestraw also received opportunities alongside the starters. Christian Ezien and Chuck Clark handled significant work at safety, with Avonte Maddox rotating into the mix as well. Along the defensive front, there were no surprises regarding the centerpiece of the unit. Aiden Hutchinson was firmly entrenched as a starter, alongside Aleem McNeil and Tyleek Williams. Detroit also rotated several defensive ends, including DJ Wanham, Tyler Lacey, Peyton Turner, and rookie Derek Moore. The coaching staff clearly wants competition throughout the defensive line, and these early sessions are giving multiple players opportunities to prove themselves. One of the most interesting moments from practice involved Tate Ratledge and Aiden Hutchinson. During walkthrough work, Ratledge pulled to the left side attempting to block Hutchinson, but the Pro Bowl defender quickly beat the attempt and appeared to offer some instruction afterward. It was a small moment, but it highlighted the competitive atmosphere that continues to define this football team. The passing game also offered some clues about Detroit's offensive hierarchy. During positional drills, Jared Goff consistently worked with a specific group of pass catchers that included Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Derek Lovett, Isaac Taslea, Brock Wright, and Tyler Conklin. That group receiving the majority of attention suggests they currently occupy important positions within the offensive structure. Amon-Ra St. Brown once again demonstrated why he remains one of the most dependable weapons on the roster. Reports indicated he generated several big plays during 7-on-7 work, reminding everyone that giving Jared Goff time in the pocket can quickly become a problem for opposing defenses. Isaac Taslea also generated positive attention. His hands stood out during drills, with observers noting that he consistently secured passes and avoided drops. For a rookie attempting to earn trust from coaches and quarterbacks, that is exactly the type of impression he needs to make this early in the process. Jameson Williams experienced a more mixed day. He flashed his playmaking ability with difficult contested catches, but he also faced strong coverage from Rock Ya-Sin, who forced an incompletion on a quick slant route. It was the kind of competitive back and forth that coaches want to see during off-season practices. Defensively, Jack Campbell delivered one of the more impactful plays of the session when he punched the ball free from Tyler Conklin, creating a fumble. It was another example of Campbell's aggressive style and growing leadership presence within the defense. There was also encouraging news regarding the team's overall health. Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, and Sam Laporta were present but not fully participating. The expectation is that Detroit is simply being cautious rather than dealing with major setbacks. Aleem McNeil, meanwhile, reportedly looked healthy and ready to continue progressing through the offseason program. Perhaps the most important development of all did not involve a specific player. It came from Dan Campbell's overall message. The Lions head coach emphasized a desire to return to some of the foundational principles that helped build this team in the first place. Campbell spoke about sharpening the sword, returning to the ground level mentality, and embracing the physical, blue-collar approach that became the identity of Detroit's rise. That mindset may ultimately become the defining storyline of this offseason. After years of growing expectations and national attention, the Lions appeared determined to recapture capture the edge that helped transform them into contenders. The early OTA observations suggest a team that is focused less on outside praise and more on returning to the gritty, work-first mentality that Dan Campbell believes built the foundation of this roster. With young players already creating buzz, veterans setting the tone, and Campbell pushing for a return to the Lions' original identity, the question now becomes, could this renewed blue-collar mentality be the factor that takes Detroit even further than previous season? What makes these OTA observations even more interesting is that they are beginning to reveal how Detroit plans to build competition throughout the roster rather than simply handout position. That philosophy has been one of the key reasons this team has continued to improve year after year, and there were several examples of it throughout practice. One area where competition appears especially important is the offensive line. While Christian Mahogany currently looks like the favorite at left guard, the coaching staff is clearly making sure nobody becomes comfortable. Miles Frazier continued receiving opportunities across multiple positions, while Juice Scruggs worked all over the interior. Detroit knows that injuries can completely change a season, and having linemen capable of playing multiple roles may become one of the biggest advantages this roster has later in the year. The approach with Blake Miller is particularly fascinating because it signals confidence from the coaching staff. Instead of delaying his development or forcing him to slowly earn every opportunity, Detroit appears interested in accelerating his integration with the starting unit. Offensive line chemistry is built through repetition, and every snap he receives now could pay dividends once meaningful football begins. At the same time, the Lions are seeing encouraging signs from some of their younger skill position players. Derek Lovett generated one of the most positive reports from practice. During 7-on-7 work, he showcased clean releases off the line of scrimmage and created separation against coverage. One play stood out when Keith Abney attempted to press him, only for Lovett to quickly beat the coverage and turn a slant route into a successful gain. Those types of plays matter during off-season practices because coaches are constantly evaluating which young players are improving and which players are ready for larger responsibilities. Lovett's development could become an important storyline as Detroit continues building depth throughout the receiving room. The same can be said for Isaac Taslea. Throughout the session, reports consistently pointed to reliable hands and solid execution during receiving drills. While fans naturally focus on explosive plays and highlight catches, coaching staffs often place just as much value on consistency. A receiver who catches everything thrown his way begins earning trust quickly, especially from a quarterback like Jared Goff, who thrives on timing and precision. Speaking of Goff, one of the more encouraging observations involved how he worked through his progressions during 7-on-7 drills. Reports indicated he moved through second, third, and even fourth reads on several plays. That may seem like a minor detail during an OTA practice, but it reflects an offense operating efficiently and a quarterback comfortable within the structure of the system. When Goff has protection and multiple receiving options available, Detroit's offense becomes difficult to defend. That reality was evident once again whenever Amon-Ra St. Brown found openings in coverage. The connection between Goff and St. Brown remains one of the most dependable elements of the entire team, and early observations suggest that chemistry has not changed at all. Defensively, there were positive signs as well. Rock Ya-Sin made several competitive plays in coverage, including a notable rep against Jameson Williams. For Detroit, seeing cornerbacks challenge receivers throughout practice is exactly what the coaching staff wants. Strong competition between the offense and defense ultimately benefits both units. Jack Campbell also continued demonstrating why expectations remain so high for him. His forced fumble against Tyler Conklin showcased the aggressive style that has become one of his trademarks. Every great defense needs players capable of creating turnovers, and Campbell's ability to attack the football is becoming increasingly noticeable. Meanwhile, several injury situations appear to be progressing exactly as the organization hoped. The Lions are taking an extremely cautious approach with players such as Brian Branch, Kirby Joseph, and Sam Laporta. There appears to be no urgency to rush anyone back onto the field. Detroit understands that the real goal is having these players available and healthy when training camp and the regular season arrive. That patience may be one of the smartest decisions the organization can make. The Lions have legitimate championship aspirations, and risking setbacks during OTA practices would provide very little benefit compared to the potential consequences. Another encouraging sign involves Aleem McNeil. Reports from practice indicated that he looked healthy and comfortable moving around the field. Considering how important he is to the interior interior defensive line, having McNeil trending in the right direction is significant news for the defense moving forward. Yet beyond individual performances, the larger theme continues to be Dan Campbell's message about returning to the team's roots. Throughout the offseason, there has been a growing sense that Detroit wants to rediscover the mindset that fueled its rise from rebuilding franchise to contender. Campbell's comments about getting back to the old ways were not about changing the roster or reinventing the scheme. Instead, they were about restoring the mentality that defined the Lions when nobody expected them to succeed. The focus on toughness, physicality, discipline, and relentless work appears to be at the center of everything happening right now. That mentality was visible even after practice sessions concluded. Players continued working, continued conditioning, and continued refining their craft long after official activities ended. Those details may not generate headlines, but they often reveal the culture inside a locker room. For Detroit, that culture has always been one of its greatest strengths. The Lions earned respect throughout the league because of how they worked, how they competed, and how they responded to adversity. Campbell seems determined to ensure those qualities remain at the heart of the team despite the increased expectations surrounding the franchise. As training camp approaches, the early OTA reports suggest a roster that is healthier, deeper, and increasingly competitive. Young players are beginning to emerge, veterans continue setting the standard, and the coaching staff appears focused on rebuilding the edge that helped transform Detroit into one of the NFL's most respected teams. The next few weeks will provide even more answers, but one thing is already becoming clear. This team is not interested in living off past accomplishments. The Lions are working to create a new chapter, and the foundation for that effort is being built right now on the practice field. As the Lions continue working through these OTA sessions, another important takeaway is that this coaching staff appears determined to maximize every roster spot. Nothing about these practices suggests complacency. If anything, the opposite appears true. Competition is being encouraged at multiple positions, and players are being challenged daily to prove they belong in larger roles. That is especially important for a team entering a season with significant expectations. When a franchise begins receiving national attention, there is always the danger of becoming comfortable. Dan Campbell's recent comments suggest he recognizes that risk and wants no part of it. The message coming out of Allen Park is simple: respect must be earned